So this week, once again, there's a disparity between the Torah reading in America and outside of the land of Israel and inside the land of Israel. But we are going to read the Parsha of Behaalotcha. It's a lengthy Parsha. It has many episodes in it. And the title of this class is The Complaint Department. And I thought I would, uncharacteristically for this class, begin with a little humor. There's a person who was speaking about the history of the labor movement in the United States and commenting on the fact that it was so dominated by Jews in its formative years and actually throughout its all foundational years. So the person just said, well, look, how do you think a union got organized? A bunch of workers were sitting around and they said, who wants to complain the loudest? So all the Jewish hands went up. And hence, as the unions got organized and as they took a stand to make working conditions better, they were dominated by Jews. But certainly in this week's Torah reading, I want to take a look at this Parsha, which is believed true to the text. It's a little interpretive, but I want to look at the events, the complicated events of this week's Parsha, and then put them together into a picture that would define the complaint department. And most especially in this Parsha, the Jewish people are on the move. They are actually leaving the encampment at the foot of Mount Sinai after having been there for a full year and a few weeks after the Exodus. Well, I'm sorry, they were not there for a full, they were there, I'm sorry. They were there for a full year after the revelation at Sinai, which happened in the 6th of Sivan. So now the Jewish people are ready to move on. And hence we have the creation of the trumpets. We've already talked about earlier in the fourth book of the Torah in Bamidbar, in the wilderness, about how the Jewish people were organized. Here we're going to see how there was a cloud of glory leading them on their trip, and there was a flame of God's presence hovering over the tent of meeting at night. So it's a very dramatic, isolated, lonely, formative setting for the Jewish people as they commence what was meant to be a relatively short journey on to the land of Israel, to the promised land, so that they could conquer the land, settle the land, and then live as God intended them to live at the Exodus, which was within the land of Israel, fulfilling the Torah, studying the Torah, and bringing to life all the values of the Torah for the first time in human history, where an entire nation would be doing so. So what are these events? I'm going to read them out, so we'll see what they are. The Parsha begins in the Stone Chumash on page 774, 775. It begins chapter 8 in the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Bamidbar. What we have initially is the commandment for Aaron to light the menorah every day. And actually, it's a dual commandment to clean out the remnants from the night before and to light the menorah. That's the first episode. The second episode, which we're going to look at, is what's called Pesach Sheni. 1 year out from having left Egypt, the Jewish people were commanded to observe Pesach. And it's interesting to note that this was the only time in the wilderness that they observed Pesach. And for the next 38 years of wandering in the wilderness, they did not observe Pesach. They did not bring the Paschal lamb. So this was a one-time event, 1 year out from the Exodus of Egypt. And we have the people coming forward and complaining that they were not able to participate in the observance of Pesach, of offering the Paschal lamb, and God responding to Moshe's inquiry and creating what's called Pesach Sheni, a second Pesach 4 weeks later, so that those people who were not able, because of their spiritual status of being tamei, of being ritually impure, they were not able to participate. So we have Pesach Sheni created. Then we have the Jewish people moving on, the statement of them moving on, which also includes the famous statement we make when we open the Ark during the services, Vayehi bin Soah ha'aron, Vayomer Moshe, when they would lift up and they were moving with the ark amidst all the portions of the tent of meeting that were disassembled, Moshe would call out to God and say, "Rise up and come with us." And then when they stopped and they would settle down, Moshe would call out again, "Shuva Hashem, return back to your dwelling amongst the Jewish people." And the Jewish people would stop and they would reassemble the Mishkan and they would again group up into their assigned places and the Jewish people would continue. And then we have in quick succession three other events. Number three, leaving out the movement idea, we have complainers, mit onanim. People in the Jewish camp were just unhappy, miserable, and complaining. The response is that a fire from Hashem went out and consumed people on the periphery of the camp. Next, we have those people who are expressing their dissatisfaction, their yearning. Hit avu ta'ava. Ta'ava is the Hebrew word for lust and desire. And therefore, hit avu ta'ava means that they created a situation of feeling deprived and therefore complaining to Hashem. Hashem responds by giving them meat, providing them with meat that fell miraculously from the sky. And when they overconsumed the meat and they were wallowing in eating the meat, so at that point, God punished them and many people died again. So this is, you could look at this week's Torah reading as a series of unfortunate events. It was like the beginning stages of the Jewish people learning to walk, so to speak, on their walk through history and their travel from the exodus of Egypt, the miraculous exodus, the standing at Sinai, and now the movement that's meant to bring us and to root us into the land of Israel, our home. And the fifth event that takes place, also an unfortunate event, is Miriam and Aaron speaking against Moshe. And here again, God intervenes, and Miriam, the source of the improper speech about Moshe, is struck by tsaras, by the biblical disease that afflicts people who speak ill of others. And the camp waits for the week while she heals from that outside the camp. She rejoins the camp, and hence the Jewish people are ready to move on. So this is a parsha which in many ways is painful to read through, because all of us each year wonder, what's with these people? Get a grip. And yet I think if we step back a bit and we held a mirror to ourselves and the normal events of Jewish communal living, and even our personal understanding of our own lives, we would see how it reflects this sense of dissatisfaction, of complaining, of murmuring, of wondering, couldn't God do better for us? And maybe that's the banner that we'll put up here. Couldn't things be better? You know, again, to call upon an old, well-worn bit of Jewish humor, when the Jewish people arrived at the border for Israel, if they would have made a left turn and headed down to the Arab Peninsula, we would have had the oil billions, we would have been the richest peoples on earth, and instead we plunge ahead into what seemed to be a very challenging land, and which has proven to be a land that we've had a tenuous grip on for the past few thousand years, suffering exile, suffering problems there, and certainly giving us much to complain about throughout Jewish history. So I want to address this. This is a take on the Parsha. It doesn't cover every detail. It doesn't include every opinion. It doesn't include great depth looking into each and every section here. But I think this is an arc which defines this week's Torah reading and which could give us a basis now to build an understanding that could be useful for us going forward. And I want to begin on page 786 in the Stone Chumash. It's chapter 10, sentence 35 and 36. And these are the famous sentences, which are Vayehi bin Soharon Vayomer Moshe Kuma Hashem V'yafutzu Eivecha V'yanusu Misanecha Miponecha. I'll read it. When the ark would journey. So again, this is the Jewish people blowing the trumpets, summoning the people together, seeing that the cloud of glory would go up off of the tent of meeting, off of the Oel Moed, and it would blow the trumpet. They'd be ready to move, and Moshe would call out, "Arise, Hashem, and let your foes be scattered. Let those who hate you flee from before you." And when it rested, he would say, "Reside tranquilly, O Hashem, among the myriad thousands of Israel." And we should have peace and harmony, and we should be able to rest, catch our breath, regroup, and get ready for the next journey. Now, what I want to suggest here is an idea. People often, when they look at this, wonder, why does Moshe make an assumption here? V'yafutzu oivecha, scatter the foes and those who hate you from before you. Why is that the anticipation? We happen to know it's true. We happen to say in the Haggadah, B'chol dor vador, in every single generation, there are people that rise up against us. And for those of us who may have wondered, how come in my generation it hasn't seemed to happen, we can now say, confirm the fact that it is in every generation that there are those who rise up against us. And as the Haggadah goes on, and Hashem sustains us. I want to suggest here that what Moshe was doing was stealing, strengthening, focusing the Jewish people, that the mission of the Jewish people through history on all of our journeys, and when we come to rest in a place for a time, is to anticipate difficulty. God's intention in this world is for us to grow and develop, and it is challenge. It doesn't have to be hatred, it doesn't have to be rejection, but moral challenges woven into the very fiber of human existence, purposefully by God. Hence, going back to the beginning story, Adam and Eve are placed in this beautiful Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Everything is perfect for them, but they have a moral challenge. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What's going on there? Why did God plant the tree if he didn't want them to eat it? A lot of questions. But the idea is from the get-go, from the first breath that we human beings have taken on earth, there is moral challenge, because it is moral challenge that makes us great. An old story, when the fellow complained about the fact to his rabbi that all the great soccer matches seemed to come out on Saturday, and he felt that he was being deprived of watching them. The rabbi said, "Good, I'll meet you on the soccer field tomorrow on Sunday." So Sunday morning, the rabbi's out there on the soccer field with a soccer ball. The student comes out and he says, "Okay, go ahead, kick it into the goal." Kid kicks it into the goal. He says, "Do it again, do it again." So you're watching goals being scored. So the kid says, "Yeah, but Rebbe, this is not what it's about. It's about trying to score a goal when there's guys trying to stop you, when there's another team trying to score their goals. It's competitive, it's challenging, it's wonderful, it develops your skills." So the rabbi says, "You're right. That's why all the good soccer matches are on Saturday, so that you can develop your spiritual skills under a little challenge and under a little difficulty, and life shouldn't be boring for you either." Big lesson, not a simple lesson. We certainly don't look to bring upon ourselves challenges and difficulties, but Moshe is able to be the leader of the Jewish people through thick and thin, through all these moral challenges that come up, through the falling short that happens over and over again to the Jewish people under his leadership, because Moshe understands This is what growth is about. This is what achieving greatness is about. And I would like to just make a personal comment. Carol Dweck, in her idea of teaching people, teaching students to see their intelligence as being flexible, and her whole ideas of understanding that when learning is difficult, that's when you grow intellectually, and making that part of your classroom and trying to overcome the assumption that if it's hard for me to learn it, then I guess I wasn't meant to learn it to begin with. Let somebody else learn that. I'm not going to be a physicist. I'm not going to be a mathematician. I'm not going to be this. I'm not going to be that. So what are you going to be? You know, there's certainly places to find, but taking on a challenge and understanding that it's through challenge that a person grows and really achieves a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. This is built into the fabric of the world, and it's the way people grow. And hence, Moshe, in his proclamation, is putting out there an element of what he's putting out is there will be challenges. God is traveling with us. We can face these challenges, we can overcome them, we can be resilient, we can be steadfast, and through that process we will achieve greatness due to the challenge in front of us. That's the message that's at the center of this difficult Torah reading. And now I just want to characterize each of these complaints. First of all, let's start with the lighting of the menorah. Where's the complaint, you would ask? After all, God comes, it's a beautiful thing. God tells Moshe, speak to your brother Aaron, he's the high priest. I'm going to give him a royal job that every day he's going to enter the sanctuary. Now it's the tent of meeting, the portable sanctuary. Later on, it'll be in the first temple. Later on, it'll be in the second temple. Eventually, it'll be in the third temple. And you're going to ceremoniously clean out the menorah, and you're going to light it to give forth light unto the world. And it's the light of Torah and wisdom. There's a backstory here because this whole chapter is out of place. It's not in the right place in the narrative where all the instructions are given for the Mishkan. So why is it here? Rashi quotes the Medrash that says, because the preceding section had to do with each of the 12 Nesiim, the other 12 tribes, not Levi, inaugurating the temple and dedicating it. And Aaron felt left out. Complaint, a spiritual complaint, maybe even a beautiful complaint. But basically, Aaron was left to feel as though, wow, if only I, as a representative of Shevet Levi, of the tribe of Levi, as a representative specifically of the Cohen family, if only I could participate in sanctifying and dedicating the Mishkan, oh, it's something I just feel I can't miss out on. Complaint, special complaint. Get to number two, Pesach Sheni. God commands the Jewish people year out, you're going to observe Pesach. You observed it in Egypt before you were emancipated. Right on that very night before you were emancipated, you slaughtered the Paschal lamb, you roasted it, you had a Seder there. Do it again. Of course, it ends up being the only time we're going to do it again for many, many years. Okay, but we're doing it. A complaint. What about me? I yearn. I have a spiritual yearning to bring the Paschal lamb, to eat it, to celebrate my Seder with my family. I'm not able to because I am ritually impure, and as one of the commentaries explained, because I'm carrying the bones of Joseph from Egypt, and therefore my job requires me, my holy job requires me to remain in this status. God responds, okay, we'll make a Pesach Sheni. You have someone else carry the bones for a little while. You'll become ritually pure. And 4 weeks later, we'll have a second observance of Pesach specifically for those who have FOMO, who feel as though that they have missed out. Again, a beautiful complaint, a spiritual complaint, one that reflects a yearning to be close to God. Next complaint. Mit onanim. Now, it's not so clear what they were complaining about here, but the word mit onanim, which means, let's see how they translate it here. It's on page 786, I think. right? And the people took to seeking complaints. Okay. Mitonanim is the people made themselves miserable. That's what the Hebrew word really means. And boy, do we ever know that, and do we ever experience that, and have we ever seen that often in our lives? Anybody who's gone through being a teenager themselves, or being the parent of a teenager, or being stuck in the same school building with a teenager, knows very, very well that it's like, hey, you've got everything going for you. I am miserable. I am just miserable. Okay. So it's a reflexive sense. It had to do with food. It had to do with the manna falling from heaven. It had to do with feeling bored. Why can't we be like all the other people of the world? So this already is a complaint which reflects the more base instincts of a person. And a person, and so often when we feel deprived, it's simply in reality us choosing to feel deprived by focusing on an area that we're weak in. The next one, hit avu ta'ava. Here already the language is much more harsh. They cause themselves to feel a tremendous, passionate desire. And here the issue was meat. They wanted to eat meat. They wanted the taste of meat. They wanted to feel that. It's a complicated story there, and there's many explanations as to why the Jewish people felt that way. But again, there's a double language, hit avu ta'ava, which means they had a passion to have a passion. So often in life, when we are convinced that my nature, my whole inner self is screaming at me to fulfill a certain passion that I have a sense is inappropriate, but it's who I am. So often that's a mischaracterization. So often it can be a sense that I have a passion to have a passion. Something has stimulated me, and instead of considering it and considering the impact it's having on me, I could do something to try to overcome it. So these two have to do with a more base aspect of human nature. And finally, the fifth event is Miriam criticizing Moshe into Aaron in the privacy of a conversation. But of course, we know every private conversation is listened to by God. What's going on there? So there are different ways of understanding it. One way of understanding it was that Miriam was rallying in defense of Moshe's wife. Although some people don't read it that way, the fact is that she felt very sympathetic to the fact that Moshe had chosen to separate physically from his own wife, which she became aware of. And she basically was saying to Aaron, what's going on here? You and I, we're prophets. Also, God speaks to us. We're in the thick of things here. And we have normal, intimate marital relationships. Why does Moshe think he's so important or so above us that he can't act accordingly? And why is his wife therefore left out? To which God responds, you guys have no idea what kind of prophecy Moshe has. It's of a different order, it's of a different intensity. Moshe is acting appropriately. Mind your own business and certainly be careful what comes out of your mouth because there are consequences to the way you speak. So here I want to pull back in the conclusion of the class and I want to explain something that's really new to me. We generally think of the Torah as working on two dimensions, two tablets of law. One is Bein Adam Lamakam, between man and God, and one between Bein Adam L'Chaveru, the manner in which we interact with one another as human beings. And in general, the Torah is given that split. But without going into the sources particularly, and based on a talk really given by the chief rabbi of South Africa last week, which was very interesting to me, it seems to be commonly held by the very important classical Jewish philosophers and commentaries that there's a third dimension, and it's called Bein Adam La'atzmo. Internally, how a person's developed as a person. And they break down the Torah, and we'll go back for the Maharal does this in the beginning of Pirkei Avot, in chapters of the Fathers, where we're taught that the world stands on Torah Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim. What is Torah? So interestingly, the Maharal understands the import of Torah as being purifying the person, perfecting your soul, your nature, your attributes, teaching yourself to find what's really good within yourself and bring that to the fore, and to deal with those aspects of human nature that are impediments to having an active, whole relationship with God. So hence he says, when we're told that the world stands on Torah, it stands on our opportunity and our focus to purify ourselves, to rectify ourselves between me and myself to become a wholesome person. Avoda. He translates avoda clearly service of God, and that's between a man and God, and that involves doing mitzvahs like saying the Shema and and other mitzvahs that we have that build our relationship between man and God. And finally, Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness, that's certainly between man and man. So again, the Maharal surprisingly expands our sense of the Torah to say that there's three domains here. I want to take this construct and apply it to the complaints in this week's Torah reading to give it more cohesiveness. And I would do so as follows. Aaron's misgivings about being left out at the dedication of the sanctuary of the Ohel Moed, and those people who were not able to bring the Paschal offering, even though their reasons were really justified. Those people were focused or at a stage where it was their relationship to God which was at the fore. Aaron yearned to be part of dedicating the house of God. The people who were ritually impure yearned to bring the Paschal lamb. What their issue was accommodating themselves properly to their place within their service of God. They weren't wrong. God responds to their need, their requests very wholeheartedly, but certainly they fell short to some extent in accepting the idea that God is ultimately fair and that the system of serving God is really open to all, even though there can be differences that we observe. Second group, the mit onanim, those people who chose to become depressed and dissatisfied, and the hit avu ta'ava, those people who became victimized by inflaming their own passions. That's certainly areas between ben odom la'atzmo. That's the area where our own internal purity, our own ability to cope with our nature, our own issue of refining ourselves, of integrating Torah values into our character, into our being, that's where they come to the forefront. And finally, the last event with Miriam, where she criticized her brother Moshe, that's clearly bein Adam l'chavero. That's between man and their fellow man. Yes, she took upon herself the cause of Moshe's wife, and she didn't do so selfishly. She did so out of concern for the integrity of Moshe's family and the well-being of his family. However, she breached this expectation that people would be much more sensitive, much more understanding, and not just take their own viewpoint and imply it to other people. And hence, she falls short in between her development in her interactions between a person and a fellow human being. So I want to emphasize here that as we go forward in life, if we want to reach the level of a Moshe who is able to handle all of these bumps on the way and is able to stay the course and is able to provide leadership to the Jewish people, steady, focused leadership that ultimately gets us to the border of the promised land and gets us to where we're meant to be. Moshe has to have an opportunity. Moshe represents to us the perfection of these three aspects of service, these three aspects of becoming an integrated Jewish person, able to fulfill the Torah able to overcome challenges, and able ultimately to fulfill the purpose of the world by facing challenge after challenge and by overcoming them appropriately, and thereby enabling the Jewish people to fulfill its purpose in the world. And I think we can learn from each of these instances, and we certainly could listen a little bit more carefully to our own, oftentimes incessant dissatisfactions in life and figure out how we could overcome them in a better way and figure out how we could better accommodate ourselves to the very beautiful reality that God places us within.